Hello everyone, this is Leah Whitehorse from Astrology, and in this recording I'm going to be looking at the astrology of August 2022. Now, at the end of the July forecast, I spoke a lot about the Uranus North Node conjunction that was exact at the end of July. And I mentioned that this continues into August. And so we begin on the 1st of August, Mars making a conjunction to the North Node. And then on the 2nd of August, Mars then conjoining Uranus. So basically we have a Mars-Uranus North Node triple conjunction, all on the 18th degree of Taurus. So this is extremely powerful. Mars is triggering everything into action. It is stimulating. Mars is the stimulation. Mars is the planet that is wanting to defend, to go out and achieve a goal, to fight, to conquer. It is passionate, it is enraged, and it is meeting with Uranus, the planet of revolution and change and progress, awakening. It is incredibly dynamic. I'm making this recording back in June of 2022, on the 25th of June, in fact, the day after we have just heard about Roe versus Wade being overturned. And of course, my mind is immediately turning to this situation with this conjunction happening, with Uranus coming up to the conjunction with the North Node as I'm speaking. And yeah, it feels very difficult right now, but it also feels as though this is galvanizing. Mars is galvanizing this revolutionary change that is absolutely necessary in our society, because we cannot continue with the systems that are in place that have allowed this to happen. Of course, there are more expressions of the Mars North Node Uranus conjunction other than just the situation that is happening directly in the US, but certainly it is a fundamental shift. And to me, it is very expressive of the US Pluto return. There's a huge article on my website. Anybody that hasn't seen it, I'll put the link below, which really deeply explores what is happening during this time and how things are unfolding. Of course, we will then have Pluto moving into Aquarius next year. It will start its shift into this new sign, which is going to speak a lot about people power, the power of groups, the power of society. Power to the people is Pluto in Aquarius. And I feel as though it's almost as if we are getting a signal. It's like a big green light in a way, or I want to say red light with Mars, but a green light, a signal that change is coming. And we start now with this new goal, with this new vision, with this sense of strength in community, in connection with one another. And the Sabian symbol for Mars conjunct Uranus conjunct the North Node is a new continent rising out of the ocean. How powerful is this? A whole new world is being built. And if we don't like what we see, if we don't like how we see things are going, then we need to change Uranus. We need to take action to bring change about. Mars conjunct Uranus. And this is what we're being directed towards with the North Node. The North Node opens the way. I was also thinking sort of on the shadow side of this Sabian symbol that today I made a comment to an American friend of mine that it seems like there are two Americas emerging. And so, of course, a new continent rising out of the ocean did make me think about that as well. So there are different ways that we can interpret this, but certainly the idea of the creation of a new world. We've got that reflected now in Saturn's passage through Aquarius, the foundations for the future. We have the huge growing tension between Saturn and Uranus. So of course, Mars is also activating that because Saturn and Uranus are now within an orb of a square of one another. And so we still have this whole issue going on of the tensions between the generations, between the old and the new, restrictions and freedoms. All of it is hugely implicated in these aspects. So what is happening now is very resonant with the astrology, although, as I always say, it doesn't mean that this is right and this is what should be happening. It's just these are the ways that the energies are at play right now, and it is very reflective of the shadow element working in society, working in the world because of the systems that are in place, and remembering always that Pluto is coming to the end of its journey in Capricorn. So therefore, a lot of these issues are becoming very acute now. The toxicity of the systems, toxic Pluto, systems, Capricorn, of the governments, of the rules, of the structures in place. And this is what needs to be changed. Pluto in Capricorn. So Pluto working positively is trying to deconstruct all of this. But the reality, Capricorn, the reality is that we've got a long way to go. But we do have now this sense of awakening with Uranus and the strength, the sense of a mission with Mars to create this world that is much more secure. Taurus, North Node, much more secure, more comfortable, more simple, more at ease, kinder. We need a kinder world, remembering Taurus is ruled by Venus, the planet of harmony and diplomacy, and of course love as well. So it is an incredibly dynamic start to the months, with Mars activating this very prominent aspect that is going on, and it will carry on to reverberate through the months because there's a lot of activation of the nodal axis during August. So we can anticipate that there's a lot coming up that feels like it's very big during this time. Coming back down to the smaller picture, on the 4th of August, Mercury will enter Virgo. So Mercury is entering its own sign. It's happy. It works well in Virgo. And when Mercury moves, it switches our mind to the topics of the sign, and also it's making us think in a new way. So we're thinking in a much more practical way because Virgo is an earth sign. It's a sign associated with service, with efficiency, with perfection, with getting things right. It's a sign that is very humble. So our thoughts are very much around what can I do to improve my circumstances or to help other people as well, because of the humility of this sign. It wants to ensure that everything is in place for everybody else. So Mercury entering Virgo is a really good time to get on with practical stuff that we need to be doing. It's making plans, it's ticking things off in the to-do list, it's using your planner, or, however you organize your life. Maybe you're thinking about the organization that you have in life or the lack of it. We kind of need to have that when Mercury is in Virgo. Maybe we're also thinking about our health as well, because Virgo is associated with health and just the general sort of well-being of the body. And also we might be just thinking about our job and our daily life, just the routines, just the general routines that we have on a day-to-day level. Mercury is just going to be turning us to think about all of that and to ensure that the routines that we have and the systems that we have in place are actually working for us and helping us to keep our minds clear. On the 7th of August, Mars will form a square with Saturn. So here now we see the activation, which has been ongoing. So Mars joined up with Uranus, and now it is squaring Saturn. So it's playing right into that Saturn-Uranus square. Mars square to Saturn can feel tough sometimes because there is a feeling that we are blocked. Mars is stopped by Saturn. Mars is frustrated by a slow pace, by rules or restrictions, or the boss or someone in authority being in the way of what it wants. So this is what we might find ourselves dealing with in our own lives, or we're responding to what is happening out there in the world, and we feel stuck, we feel cornered. That's what squares tend to do. We feel cornered. We feel that we can't take any action. But even though squares are tough, they do force us to reassess so that we can take the right action. Saturn is actually slowing Mars down so that he doesn't get too impulsive, so that he doesn't just go rushing in without thinking. Sometimes Mars-Uranus can be reckless. So Saturn slows Mars down enough, forces us to consider our direction and what we are doing. Is this the mature response? Saturn. Mars is very youthful. Mars is like a teenager, which is great for when we need that kind of to hell with everyone, I'm doing this kind of energy. But there are also times when that is not appropriate. So Saturn is really asking us to ensure that we're playing the long game, that we're mature in our response to the situation, that we're not just kind of going off being triggered by everything. And the slowdown will allow us time just to regroup and ensure that we are going about things in the right way to achieve what we're trying to accomplish. On the 10th of August, the Sun will form a square to the north and south node, so squaring this nodal axis once again, activating all of this karmic material, and it indicates that we are going through some kind of turning point. The Sun is in the sign of Leo. And once again, I can't really ignore the fact that Leo is a sign that is associated with children. It's also associated with royalty and with theatre and entertainment and creativity. And so on a general level, it might be reminding us to tap into this creative energy that we all have. We are all a spark of the divine. So we have this enormous creative potential within us that perhaps we are not using to our benefit. But certainly we could also say that maybe there is some story here about ego and how the ego is playing into and playing against our karmic mission, whether that is globally or personally. So we've kind of just got to check in with ourselves, whether we are pushing back against the changes that are needed, whether that's in our own lives or in the world out there. Are we trying to resist that because we think that we know what we should have for ourselves? This is what I want. This is what I believe. This is what I identify with, no matter whether the universe is kind of pushing me, kicking me every now and again to go in this direction instead. Sometimes we ignore those messages from spirit. We all know when we're doing it. So I think the Sun square to the nodal axis is just reminding us to listen to what the universe has to say, listen to your intuition, listen to your spirit guide, listen to what your gut instinct is telling you, because there's always times when we kind of don't really want to hear the message, but it's important that we do listen. It's important that we are aware of the truth, even if we don't like it. On the 11th of August, Venus will also enter Leo. So this changes how we approach our relationships, how we approach money, and also what we value. So again, Leo connected with children, creativity, entertainment, dating, the joy of life. And so Venus going into Leo can also bring about a very playful influence, because we're more light-hearted here, light being the operative word because Leo is ruled by the sun. So we're more light-hearted in our approach to what we love and who we love. And there is very much a need to be seen. So that can translate into feeling more confident, feeling more assertive, more willing to step up and say, hey, look at me, I'm feeling good. You know, we want to dress up, we want to go out to party and play, all those kinds of things. So that's really positive. It's about being proud of yourself, proud of what you've done, and really loving yourself. So Venus going into Leo can certainly help us feel a little better on a personal level, remembering Venus is a personal planet. And also the idea of valuing our free time, valuing the things that we enjoy, so we spend more time doing those things. But working in shadow, the difficulty with this is the attention-seeking behavior that can sometimes happen. One of the most common phrases we use for Venus in Leo is the prima donna. So the prima donna may well demand attention because she is excellent at her wonderful dance and we're all giving her applause. That is a lovely expression. It's super creative, remembering Venus herself is very, very creative. So we've got this wonderful creative energy. But also it's the actor on set who is shouting at everybody, and, you know, no one else can say anything because they are the star. They are the one who is more important than everyone else. Look at me constantly. So that can be the downside. We can become far too demanding, especially with the sun being in Leo and square to the nodes as well. So we might find ourselves, if we're kind of resisting the changes that need to happen, being more demanding, or alternatively finding ourselves the center of attention in a way that perhaps we didn't expect or want, especially as Uranus is hanging around the North Node at the moment. So the sun will be forming a square as well there to Uranus. So we've got a little bit of a mixed picture. In some ways it can be very playful and fun and light, but of course we do have these very intense themes going on in the background. So it's always about how we work with that energy. Generally, Venus in Leo, what do you love doing? Spend some time doing that thing, and maybe make a date with your honey, all those kinds of things, or a date with yourself. You know, take yourself out on an artist date. What a nice way to work with Venus in Leo. Mars will also sextile Neptune on the same day, so that is super creative. Neptune is the imagination, Mars is the energy and vigor, and we've got the imagination being stimulated by Mars, and we've got an invitation to use those energies productively together. So yes, Venus entering Leo, Mars sextile Neptune could be an excellent time if you are artistically inclined. We could also say as well, Mars sextile Neptune is acts of kindness. Mars, action, Neptune, kindness, compassion, empathy. We're also maybe taking action on our intuition with Mars sextile Neptune as well. So it's a really helpful influence. On the 12th of August, we have the full moon in Aquarius, and I would anticipate that this is quite a powerful lunation, not least because the sun is still square to the nodes. So we've now got the sun and the moon at cross purposes to the nodal axis. We also have the issue of what is good for the individual, the sun in Leo, and what is good for the group, the moon in Aquarius. We've also got the moon sitting right beside Saturn. So this huge issue about freedom and restriction is really at play in this chart because the moon is, of course, also square to Uranus. So we have this real sense of running up against some kind of block with Saturn. The mood may be low, the public mood. So the public is the moon and Saturn is like a depressive influence. So we've got a low mood. We've got a lot of anxiety because of Uranus, because of all the things I've been talking about, the rules and restriction and the generational differences and the old and the new. All of that is coming into play. We've also got the moon in a wide square to Mars as well. So Mars is still there. So So that can also indicate anger and frustration. So yes, this is a difficult picture that we have here. The helpers are Chiron and Pallas. So we've got a sextile to Chiron, we've got a trine to Pallas. So Pallas is about negotiation, diplomacy, wisdom, like feminine wisdom. She is also a warrior, but she uses her warrior energies in much more disciplined ways, in much more kind of grown up ways than Mars. Like Mars will just go out and hit and punch and fight. And yes, sometimes we need that energy, but Pallas is much more about negotiating, listening to all sides, especially with her being in Gemini at the moment. So it's all about the dialogue. It's all about the dialogue with Pallas being in Gemini. So that's our release point. And then with Chiron is we're looking for ways to motivate ourselves towards healing, towards bringing things together, towards looking at where we feel triggered and how we can deal with that on a personal level. We're also looking at being proactive about finding solutions, about being open to learning and teaching. Chiron is a mentor and a teacher. And then with Pallas in Gemini, we've also got some kind of discussion here about teachers and listening and finding the right information. So that's going to be crucial around this time to help us deal with this block or this anger or this anxiety or all three. On the 14th of August, Mars will form a trine with Pluto. So Mars currently moving through Taurus, trining Pluto in Capricorn. So this could be quite a helpful influence considering the bigger picture that is going on, because it helps us to put our energies, Mars helps us to put our energies into making practical Taurus changes, Pluto. So it motivates us to get on with clearing out, getting rid of what isn't working. It motivates us to be honest, to be truthful, to be transparent. So Mars trine Pluto is a really good kind of warrior energy that is quite stable because of the signs that both of these planets are in. On the 20th of August, Mars will activate Sedna. Sedna is on the final degree of Taurus. I've spoken about this a lot, this weeping sisters degree. And I think it's certainly manifested very literally considering what has been happening with women's rights. So Mars is activating Sedna, stimulating that degree. So we may hear more around those issues around this time. And then Mars will quickly move into Gemini. And this is a major movement because Mars later this year is going to have a retrograde in Gemini. So what it means is that Mars is going to be spending about 7 months in Gemini, a very long period of time. Usually Mars will spend around 2 months in each sign as it moves around the zodiac. But this time it's going to be a full 7 months. So because Mars is going to spend such a long time in Gemini, we know that we have a lot of work to do here. Mars in Gemini, generally speaking, we have an uptick in the pace of life. Things start to happen really quickly because Gemini is a fast-moving sign and Mars itself likes things to happen quickly. So we've got a furious amount of movement. This could also indicate conflicts, Mars, around Gemini and global third house associated systems. So we've got some kind of conflicts around schooling and education. Of course, Mars being a planet associated with weapons, it to me seems very obvious that this particular period may be very hot when it comes to the issue of the shootings that have happened in the US in schools and the issues around age limits associated with buying guns and all these kinds of things. So school shootings certainly seem to be a topic that Mars in Gemini could be discussing. We've generally got the idea of divisiveness. because we have two opinions, two roads. We've got the twins, one twin immortal, one twin not immortal, one in the heavens, one in Hades. We have a sense that there is so much conflict in discussion and everyone is trying to kind of be heard. Mars in Gemini tends to talk loudly. Mars can use words as weapons when we have Gemini influence. So we've really got to pay attention to this energy at work and how we're communicating with one another. Positively, it's an excellent time for presenting ideas because we have the confidence of Mars, we have the assertion of Mars. So we've got the gumption to stand up and be heard. So if we're protesting, for example, people out on the streets protesting, Mars in Gemini could also speak of that as well. We could possibly hear a lot more about protests as far as transport systems are concerned. Certainly in the UK, we are experiencing this because we have train strikes at the moment. So understandably, the people that work in the railway industry are very angry with a lot of changes that are being implemented by the powers that be. They're not being paid enough. So there's a lot of rumbling going on there. And Gemini can speak of our transport systems that are at a local level, anything, trains, buses, taxis, all those kinds of things. And it's also postal services and newspapers and how we receive information as well. So Mars going into Gemini is going to stimulate all of these kinds of ideas. And we're going to have a lot, like I said, a lot of work to do here because we're going to have so much time of Mars in Gemini. So it's very important that we look at how we can be constructive with this. How can we best express our anger constructively without tearing each other down? How can we be vocal without shouting other people down? How can we just communicate in a more effective way? And also, the mind is a tool. The mind is a tool with Mars in Gemini. So how we think about things is going to be fundamental to how things unfold going forwards. On the 23rd of August, the sun will enter Virgo. So now we are in Virgo season. And the sun's entry into Virgo suggests a time when we are looking at how can I improve? So self-improvement. I was just saying earlier that Virgo is associated with efficiency, with perfection, with getting things right. So when the sun moves into Virgo, maybe we want to focus on our skills, for example. So it might be our work skills. So we might want to take a workshop or learn from a colleague or in some other way be open to the idea of getting better. We also might become more aware of how we're feeling on a physical level, and we might want to tweak our diet or our exercise, or maybe want to sleep more. Certainly Virgo is going to really ask us to explore whether we feel up to doing the work that needs to be done on a day-to-day basis, and if we're not feeling up to it, then what can we do to improve that? Or maybe, obviously, some of us have chronic illnesses and we can't always be improving things because the issue is chronic. But maybe we can improve our relationship to our bodies so that at least we're treating ourselves with kindness, we're treating ourselves as best we can, even if we have problems or difficulties or illnesses or conditions that can't ever improve for whatever reason. Uranus is going to station retrograde on the 24th of August. So this is a yearly occurrence. And when Uranus goes retrograde, it has this action of increasing the amount of rebelliousness that is in society, out there in the world, and also within ourselves. Because Uranus is putting us in touch with that inner rebel. When a planet goes retrograde, we take it inwards. We take that energy inwards and we reconnect with it. Now, Uranus, what often happens is that we can squash Uranus because we don't want to be too different. We want to feel accepted by the group. We want to be friends with people. We want to have friends. And so those parts of us that we think are too different, too weird, too wacky, we can try to put that to one side. We sort of shove it away somewhere and forget about it. But of course, that part of us is always knocking on the door. It's always wanting to be heard because we are unique. We're meant to be unique and we are meant to be different from one another. And it's about accepting our differences. So Uranus retrograde will put us in touch with those parts of ourselves that have been sort of sidelined or alienated. And because we're being put in touch with these alienated parts of ourselves, we might start to act out. We might shock ourselves or maybe shock each other, shock the people around us because we're starting to act differently because now we're more in touch with this part of ourselves that needs that expression, that needs to be free. If we don't feel free, then Uranus retrograde is really going to put us in touch with that. And we are going to want to reclaim that freedom, to liberate ourselves. On the 25th of August, Venus is going to follow in the Sun's footsteps, forming a square with the nodal axis, square the North Node, square the South Node. Venus is the planet that we associated with women and the feminine principle. So certainly it means that there's a lot of tension around the idea of women, Venus, about which way we are going because of the stress around the North and the South nodes. I also need to skip a few days and just point out that Venus will also be joined by Ceres on the 28th of August. So Ceres and Venus combined, we now have some kind of story about women and motherhood. Venus women, and also, of course, other issues like love and harmony and diplomacy. And then Ceres, the mother, the great mother. And then also on the same day that Ceres squares the North and South Node, we have Hygeia conjoining the South Node. And Hygeia is associated with preventative medicine. So it really feels like there is a lot of conversation continuing around this Roe Wade issue. It's incredibly literal looking at these planets. Certainly Hygeia conjunct the South Node could speak of the ending of preventative medicine. But also as well, of course, the South Node shows us what we are trying to release and let go of. And the problem here is that this is about power and control, about power over women's bodies. And so the issue that we've had is Hygeia moving through Scorpio and the South Node moving through Scorpio has been really trying to help us to let go of these toxic systems that are in place, the greed and the power and the control and all of that kind of stuff. And for whatever reasons, this has not come about. This has not been allowed to move forwards. But, I do trust the astrology. I trust that this situation will be resolved. And we can also see with Sedna stationing retrograde on the 31st of August. Again, she is on that weeping sister's degree. So she's grinding into this very painful situation that we are going through, which, by the way, also speaks of the evolution on a planetary level as well, and speaks of what's happening to our earthly resources. All of this is incredibly acute as we come to the end of August. Also, in the midst of all of this activation of the nodes with Venus and Ceres and Hygeia, all these goddesses, we've also got a new moon in Virgo. So the new moon in Virgo occurs on the 27th of August. And this new moon will be square to Mars, in a very tight square to Mars. So once again, we can see that the lunations around this month are very feisty, they are animated, there's a lot of energy being stimulated, and yes, there is quite an angry picture with the squares to Mars. So the difficulty that we have around this time is, what do we practically do? So the new moon in Virgo could basically say, we need to make a new start as far as health is concerned, because of forced, a square, Mars in Gemini, a decision that we're angry about. So having to make some kind of new start that we've been forced to do, we've been pushed to do, that we don't want to do, but we've got to do it anyway. This could also play out on an individual level as well, that there are perhaps decisions that have been made by other people that we feel annoyed about, angry about, that we didn't want for whatever reason. But now we are having to make some kind of new start to improve our situation, to do whatever we can to improve our situation. And sometimes that is going to bring up some irritation because of the Martian square to the new moon. But also maybe it will give us some energy, give us some vigor, give us some courage to implement some kind of seed changes, taking a seed action, a small action. Virgo speaks of the little things, the details. We do need to pay attention to the details. I'm also noticing that Mercury, the ruler of this lunation, will have just gone into Libra. So that was actually on the 26th of August. So Mercury in Libra is speaking about diplomacy in our communication, again, keeping that dialogue going. But I am conscious as well that Mercury is still in a wide opposition to Neptune. So we do still have some mixed communication. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the fact that we don't have all the information that we would like, it's just not available, or we're uncertain, we're unsure of the information that we have. We don't know if the conversations we're having are the right ones, or whether the people we're talking to are the right people. So there's a little bit of that going on in this chart as well. But still, I feel like, if we can use that Martian energy for a constructive change, and to be adaptable, because Virgo is a sign where the new moon is. Virgo is a sign that is highly adaptable. We need to be super flexible around this time to deal with all of these rapid changes that are happening. Even if we are angry with them, we must adapt. We must quickly, I want to snap my fingers as I'm doing this, but it will make my microphone peak, so I won't. But it is that kind of snappy, let's just get going with this. Let's do this. Okay, this has happened. Now I need to adapt and look at what can I do, a tiny, tiny step that will improve things, whether it's for collective issues or whether it's for personal issues. This concludes my reading for August 2022. I hope you found it helpful. If you would like to hear more from me, I do have a website and also a Patreon. On my Patreon, I do readings for the lunations. I do a weekly forecast. And depending on what tier you are on, there is a huge library of material available. So do check out the links below. And in the meantime, I wish you many blessings on your path.